Hey everyone, welcome back. This is going to be my first live stream that I'm doing for my channel, and I decided to throw myself under the bus and rather than react to something simple like new chapter dropping, I'm going to be talking about a few different topics. So I'm going to start off with just some general stuff regarding my, I guess, apathy towards One Piece lately, and then I kind of want to delve into just my thoughts on the Wano Reverie arcs so far. And then after that, I want to really talk about my theories, expectations, and just a few other general things about Wano and possibly Reverie going forward. So, start with the easy stuff. So, a little bit of background. I first got into One Piece about a couple of years ago, almost 10 years ago now. First exposure to it was in high school. I read the first few volumes back then, and like most people, I was turned off by the art at the time, and so I wasn't really getting into the manga back then, so kind of dropped off for a few years. And then once I started university, I kind of picked it up back again once I started getting more interested in it. And I caught up when it was at the Sabaudi arc, and I've basically been reading it week to week ever since. So almost 9, 10 years now, I've been reading One Piece week to week. And for the most part, I've enjoyed, I'd say, 90% of what we've gotten so far, except when we got to the Whole Cake Island arc. And I think that's the first time I've ever actually been really disappointed in the series. And so, a little bit of a digression here. So, I've gotten to become super critical of the series lately, and it's kind of been bleeding into a lot of conflicted feelings I've been having with, like, a lot of conversations I've been having with other fans regarding, should I be criticizing the series? Are my because I'm a self-proclaimed crazy theorist because I come up with theories, ideas that are pretty unconventional. And Whole Cake Island was the first time I actually started seriously doing that. And I know a lot of people are wondering, well, was that or one of the reasons why you didn't like the arc was, the story you got was different from what Oda gave us, and you just didn't like, the fact that you were wrong. Kinda, sorta, but not really. I guess that was one part of it. And the other part is just as a reader, like starting to become more critical of the series and going back and looking at Oda's work, there seems to be a real distinction between his pre and post time skip work. Pre-time skip, like nostalgia factor and everything aside, I love most of the arcs that we've gone through. And then post-time skip, apart from Fishman Island, it really feels like everything's been subpar so far. And like part of it's me feeling like, is it just a general case of is Oda getting worse as a writer, or is it just my evolution as a reader has kind of just changed my perspective on the series and it's just quote unquote not for me anymore. And it's kind of like the big question I've been struggling with recently, like, is it really that I don't like the series anymore and Oda hasn't changed? Is it my expectations getting in the way of, what I want from the series, or is it something else? And I think I've come to the conclusion that it's the factor of, it's a mix of all of those and none of those at once. So, like, I don't want to really start in on breaking down the Whole Cake Island arc yet, but going back and looking at it, did my theories affect my feelings on it? A little bit. I went into the arc with a few expectations, and when those weren't met, yeah, I was really, really disappointed with how certain events played out. But apart from that, going back and looking at it objectively, it's not Oda's strongest work. Like, it's the arc has universal acclaim among most of the fandom, and I can't say I see it. I really can't. There's just so many problematic elements to the arc that I want to break down and explore and really get into the nitty gritty of why the arc really didn't speak to me. And the other question of, well, is it just that you're growing out of love with the series? And maybe because this is another discussion I've had with fans, and I actually brought this up last time when I was on my good friend, the Black Manga Critics One Piece stream. But I've always seen the series as being broken up into two different sections. So you have the Grand Line, obviously, which is the first half of the journey, and then you have the New World. And I've always seen that as two different parts of like the process of growing up and maturing. So in the first half with the characters, you have what they call the character development. So you're seeing them fleshed out. You're learning their backstories, their ambitions, their motivations, their weaknesses, their flaws, everything like that. And you're seeing them come to terms with how they fit into this world. That's everything leading up to basically Sabaudi. Then in the new world, you're seeing, or what I expected to see, is really the next stage of that, which is the character growth. So you're starting to see not only how their flaws and weaknesses and things define them, but also how they're affecting the world around them, and also not responding to like learning their place in the world, I guess, is what I wanted. And Whole Island was really the first arc where I felt like we were going to see that with Sanji, and we didn't get it. Like, it was a terrible arc. And I know a lot of fans will be like, oh no, Sanji had lots of character development. You know what you're talking about. I highly disagree, but I'm not going to get into that here right now. But no, I will have a lot of thoughts coming up about that in the future. So that's part of like the other part of, should I expect Oda to be growing as an author going forward? Which kind of leads into the third point of this, which is the criticisms. So a lot of things I hear is, oh, it's Oda's story, he can tell it how he wants. Or, you can't influence Oda, like it's his work, you're not gonna be able to do anything to him. So why do you try bothering to do this? Or, do you think you can tell a better story than Oda, or what constitutes a good story, etc., etc. But the thing fans don't seem to get is criticizing a series doesn't mean you don't love it. Criticizing a series just means that you're looking at the series' flaws and kind of seeing ways to improve what you're seeing. And yeah, I know like none of these comments are ever going to get to Oda. Like I've written tons of editorials about this and like criticized a lot of the problems. I know Oda's never going to actually read it, but I'm not really doing it for him. I'm kind of doing these criticisms and editorials that I write for the fans, really, because I want to kind of have the fans start to critically analyze the series like I'm starting to. Because find a lot of the time when you criticize Oda's problems with like sexism or diversity or inclusivity or anything like that, the feedback you get is, oh, you're trying to ruin the series, or, this is a core part of what One Piece is. And again, like, hardly disagree with all of that. And I disagree with the idea that Oda can't be wrong. Like, you can't possibly have a flaw in his story, or he can only tell good stories because he has an idea of what he wants to say. And it also kind of ignores the fact that authors and readers both have a symbiotic relationship. Like everyone assumes that, Oda was writing the story for himself and all this, and like he has all the power. And we fans are just there to read and enjoy it. And if you don't like it, just drop the series. But then if he presents something problematic, it's supposed to be like, oh, your action's supposed to be just ignore it and move on. And that's problematic for different reasons, because it's like, well, it's just a story. What's the big deal? But the problem is these stories keep perpetuating themselves. If Oda's story was the only one that had, blatant problem with sexism and shonen, then yeah, I could totally understand being like, okay, well, we can just ignore it, move on, because it's not really that influential. But One Piece in Japan is such a big series. I can't sit back and say, well, I can just ignore what he's doing and not criticize it at all, because he is going to be influencing a lot of children and the generation reading the series, even if he doesn't think he's doing it, or even if it's not as in your face as people expect it to be. And so, that's part of the reason I do the criticisms, is because I want to point that out. and I want to open up conversations with fans on how do we get, these authors to acknowledge the problematic aspects of their series, and even just start a conversation of, should we even be talking about this? What can we do? And just general things like that. And that's really a big part of a lot of my recent problems with the series and really my expectations for the Wano Reverie arc. But I'll just digress into something else first before I get into that. So Wano Reverie, I've said this before, is kind of my make or break it point with the series. Depending on how Oda handles this going forward, my fandom is going to change depending on what happens. I'm not sure if it's going to be a case of I'll completely drop the series and move on to something else, or I'll keep with it and keep doing what I'm doing, even if I don't enjoy reading the series. And so I know a lot of people have been questioning because the reactions to Wano Reverie so far have been like everyone's just losing their minds, being like, oh, this is one of the greatest arcs in One Piece, it's going to be so great. And I haven't really seen this level of excitement since Fishman Island and like the level of expectation. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Personally, like the reason I don't find Wano Reverie so far hasn't really appealed to me is basically because of what I look for in storytelling. So a lot of fans I've talked to recently said, the biggest appeal for them in One Piece is the world building and the rather than the character development, whereas I always seen it as 50-50. Like the appeal has always been that it's a good balance of character building and world building, but it seems like post time skip Oda's become more focused on the world building and he's really scaled back on the character development, either because he doesn't know what he wants to do with the characters or because he doesn't think that there's any need for them to grow and just giving them back stories and things is development enough. And for me that's kind of like the big miss because if whenever I read a story, the things that appeal to me, if I had to split it, would be like an 80-20 split. So 80% of the appeal for stories for me comes from the characters and 20% to the world building. Like to me, world building is just the accent for the characters. Like if the world is super interesting, it could be super creative. But if I'm not interested or invested in the emotionally invested in the characters that inhabit the world, I'm not going to be really interested in the story. And Reverie Wano has been so far really good for the world building aspects so far. I mean, we started Reverie. Yeah, it was good to see all the characters back again, like Vivi, Dalton, Dr. Correja. It was good to see all of them back and see them in their new roles. And it's good to learn. Like, yes, there was a lot of massive information dropped. Like, what's the giant straw hat in the treasure vault? Who's Im Sama? Who is what's going to happen with the Reverie? Jewelry Bonnie having infiltrated it. But the problem with all of these is fans expect that the payoff from all these big reveals is going to be something that's worth it. And I can't say I really buy that anymore, especially after what happened with Whole Cake Island, where we set up all these expectations and promises that Oda didn't deliver on. And so when he's introducing something new, like, oh, Kuma being the former king of the Sorbet Kingdom, is like, all right, that's a good piece of information to know. Yes, it's groundbreaking. It completely changes our perspective on him as a character. But until I see how that actually plays out in an arc, I'm not really sold on the idea that I'm gonna enjoy basically. So that's why so far my reactions to Reverie Wano have been kind of met because I've been looking to see the Straw Hats grow and develop post time skip, and Oda hasn't been delivering on that front. I mean, Whole Cake Island is such a huge misstep in that. It's kind of really, really kind of it's like pouring water on the fires of my fandom. Like it's just burnt out right now, and the embers are barely staying alive. And so, you know, does that mean I'm not gonna like Wano, Reverie, or that it can't be great? No, it doesn't mean that. Like Oda could still tell a great story, but I don't know if he can anymore. And I know fans have already heard this from fans many times, being like, "Oh, are your expectations, theories, whatever, going to get into the way of Wano Reverie?" Honestly, I'm going to say maybe because I'm not going to lie and say I don't have any expectations going into these arcs because I have massive, massive expectations. I've written theories on this. I've wrote a massive editorial on this. So I expect a lot from Wano. And in this, I kind of want to get into a little bit of my theory making process because I feel like that's something that's a little bit misunderstood by a lot of fans. So I think theorists typically get a bad rap in the community because I think most fans have the idea that theorists come up with this really cool idea that they fall in love with, and then when Oda goes in a completely different direction, theorists just lose their shit and get really mad because they're like, oh, you get mad because Oda delivered something you didn't expect and you can't look at it objectively, and that's why you don't like this arc. And yeah, to an extent, that's true. When I make a theory, I spend a lot of time researching it. And of course, it's going to be an idea that appeals to me because I'm the one that made it. It's going to be based on things I like to see in stories. That said, I don't just pull these theories completely out of my ass. I don't just go, one day go, it'd be really cool if this XYZ happened. And I just get super invested in a theory. That said, it is partially kind of what I do because with my theories is kind of I look at little step back. So with the theories, people are saying, the idea is that you can't predict Oda. Like, oh, you don't ever know what he's gonna throw at you. And he's even said it before that he wants people to be surprised. And that's true to an extent, I suppose. Like I think Reverie arc proves that Oda's still got, there's still so much about the series and this world that we don't know about. But those of you that are fans of One Piece or even the One Piece podcast probably know Greg. He's Ochimusha108 on Twitter, and he's the self-proclaimed One Piece maniac. And I think he's proven that yes, the series can be predicted as long as you know Oda and you know his series, and and there you realize that there is a formula to each of the arcs that he follows. So is it impossible to predict the series? No. Is it really, really hard? Yes. So that's part of it. So it's not that the series is impossible to predict. And the part of the theory making process for me is kind of looking at analyzing the story and seeing how well do I understand Oda's intentions, but also how well do I understand the story. And so I think Wano is a perfect example of this because I have a couple of different ideas about what I expect, themes and arcs to be, and it's based on a few different ideas. So I want to kind of throw those first, and I'll kind of delve into how I got to what my thought process was basically. So for me, I expect Wano to kind of deal with the idea of heroes versus villains, the roles of weapons, and I really, really, really hope that this is an arc where Oda really does address sexism in the series. So I think the easiest way to start with will be, I think, something we can all agree on, which is Zoro's character arc. So I think everyone expects that Wano is going to be, the arc of Zoro, and that he's going to grow at some kind of development or growth similar to what Sanji had during Whole Cake Island. And so I kind of want to focus on what that could possibly be. And it's really related to things we already know about him and his relationship to a couple of other characters. So this is where we're kind of getting into the crazy theory territory, but there's a few different cast of characters I expect to show up on Wano. So I expect Tashigi, Smoker, Green Bull, Vegapunk, Edward Weevil, and Moria to show up on Wano. I'll kind of get into the reasons for each of those later, but easiest one to start off with will be Tashigi. Zoro has, I guess you could call it a quote unquote rivalry with Tashigi, stretching back all the way to really his past with Kuina back during the Axe Hand Morgan arc, and then really started with Town. So I wrote an editorial about this, what to summarize. Like the thing I loved about Zoro when he was initially introduced was he had a rivalry with a female swordsman, which was such a big thing for me. Like the fact that he had a female swordsman introduced back then who could rival Zoro in strength, and he looked up to her was such a great setup for his backstory. And the fact that he made a promise with her that one day one of them would become the world's greatest swordsman, and then she died in a really stupid way. And ever since then, Zoro has been like a man on a mission, and he's trying to achieve that goal because he made a promise to his friend. Then in Town, he meets someone who looks exactly like his friend, and ever since then, they've had like a really childish rivalry going, and it's never been resolved. Like it's been over almost 80 volumes now, and Oda really hasn't given us closure into A, why does Tashiki even look like Kuina? Or B, like, given given some kind of depth to Zoro and her relationship. And given what Tashiki's goal is, like she's not going to be the world's greatest swordsman. That's not her goal. Her goal is to take away swords from the people that she believes are using them for evil purposes. And so I can't imagine that she wouldn't be included on in Wano in some way. And I'm really kind of mad with Oda because when Tashi was first introduced, like the Queen Tashi similarities kind of went on with not only the look like each other, but both also have the hang up of them being, women in a field where they're not expected to succeed. And this was one of the biggest things that stood out to me about Queen back in the Zoro flashback was her father straight up just told her that, women cannot be the greatest swordsman. And Zoro got really pissed off at her for even trying to suggest that because, he's like, you're my rival. So how does that make me look when you're giving up and I'm getting so frustrated that I can't beat you? And then he hears a repetition of the same thing in Town where he defeats Tashigi so easily and he refuses to kill her. And she's like, oh, is this because I'm a woman? Is it because I'm not powerful? And then we don't really get anything from that until Alabasta, when again, Tashigi goes through that same thing where Smoker tells her, follow your own justice. And then at the end of Alabasta, she tells him, well, I couldn't follow my own justice because I was too weak. I had to rely on someone else to step in for me because I couldn't enforce my own ideals. And then he told her, get stronger. And then ever since then, she hasn't really improved that much. Like we see her come back in Punk Hazard, and while her skills have improved from where she was 2 years and a bit ago, the gap between her and Zoro during that 2 year time skip has only grown even greater. And Punk Hazard was just such a terrible, terrible, terrible arc for Tashigi because she basically just got nerfed. Like in the Monet fight, Zoro steps in, with the whole sexism bit, like he steps in, hacks Monet in half. Really like that scene. But again, the sexism was so blatant in there. And Tashi, again, this was another case of her being helpless and being unable to enforce her own ideals and senses of justice. And if Oda really wants me to believe that he's going to take her seriously as a character, she needs to come back in Wano, and she really needs to have some kind of character arc. And I really do believe that it has to be tied in with Zoro's character arc. And I know a lot of fans will be like, oh, you can't possibly predict what Zoro's character arc will be. And maybe not. Oda could take it a bunch of different ways. But I do have an idea of what I want it to be. And I think the biggest thing to focus on is Zoro and sexism. Ever since, like, Zoro's relationship with women has kind of been steadily going downhill ever since the series has progressed. Like his relationship with Tashiki being evidence of that. And ever since he's been training with Mihawk over the time skip, he's gotten just supremely arrogant. And he's just been looking down on everyone. And so I think one of the things that needs to happen to him on Wano is he needs to get humbled. He needs to lose a fight to, a more powerful swordsman, and he needs to kind of dial it back and again learn really what it means to be a swordsman. Because I think the one thing we've learned about Zoro is okay, he wants to be the world's greatest swordsman. But why? Why does he want to be the world's greatest swordsman? Does he need a reason to do it? No, he doesn't. But if that's one of the routes Oda's going to take his development in Wano, I'd kind of like to find out the reasoning behind that. I think a broader question for that is also, what does it mean to be the world's greatest swordsman? Does that just mean you're more powerful than, everyone else? Does it mean you have greater technical skills than anyone else? You just have the strength or the willpower to want to achieve that dream? Like everyone expects that yes, Zoro is going to beat Mihawk, and that's going to make him the world's greatest swordsman. But is that really all there is to it? And again, with him on Wano, is a defeat going to be enough for him to learn and grow? Like, well, if he gets defeated, will he be humbled because he thinks, oh, I trained with the world's greatest swordsman, and obviously I haven't learned enough, and will that be enough for him to kind of grow, or does he need something else? And this is kind of where I have the radical theory that I don't know how many fans are actually going to like, but I really feel like Zoro is going to lose his Kitetsu and the Wado, and they're both going to get shattered on Wano. And I'm going to expand on that by saying not only will they get shattered, but they will be shattered when he fights against an opponent who's going to be a female swordsman. Because more than anything on Wano, I think I want to see Zoro fight a woman because he really needs to re-examine his relationship with them, and especially with Tashigi. Because ever since, I think the thing that Zoro needs the most development in is re-examining the reasons why he became a swordsman in the first place. And really, a defeat at this point is not going to do much for him. Like, he needs to lose the sword because I feel like that's the only way that he'll have to be. Let me rephrase this. For me, losing the sword isn't just about him being defeated, but it's also like a symbol for Zoro reforging himself. So I want him to re-examine his relationship with, Tashigi Kuina and all that. And I also want to bring up another point, which is back during Alabasta, Zoro went against the fight with Mr. One. We learned about the breadth of all things. And that's something that hasn't been brought up ever since. Like in the fight against Mr. One, Zoro learned that, what does it mean to be a true swordsman? Well, a true swordsman will be one whose sword cuts what he wants it to cut and won't cut, what he doesn't want it to cut. And has never been brought back again. And I think Wano is really the perfect time to do that. Because this is the other thing that's been happening throughout the series is in Town, when he picks up the Kitetsu, he can feel that the sword is cursed. Like he can tell that, there's something odd about this sword. Even in Thriller Bark, when he gets Shusui from Ryuma, he makes comments about, oh, this sword is a problem child. It doesn't want to listen to what I say. Or even in Water 7, when he cuts himself out of the chimney and Chopper is there, even without being able to see it, he's able to sense the sword. And I have to wonder if that's somehow also related to his development. Because I think the breadth of all things, we have the voice of all things in the series, and then we have the breadth of all things. And I feel like those are two sides of the same coin, with the voice being an ability you can use to listen to like the souls of or sense the souls of inanimate or animate like living things. And then the breadth of all things allows you to sense these souls or interact with, inanimate objects. And so I feel like on Wano, Zoro's going to have to learn how to harness this ability as a power up. And so the way I see it going, like, again, Oda could handle this any number of ways. But the way I see it going is I think Zoro will meet a descendant of Kitetsu on Wano, and from them he'll learn the breath of all things. Now, this is where we're kind of going into the crazy theory ideas, but we know that the Kitetsu swords are cursed. And I've been kind of speculating on, what does that mean that they're cursed? Does that mean, Kitetsu somehow did something in the forging process that causes the swords to like evil? Like, do the swords have their own independence? Do they have the ability to think? Like, do they have free will? Can they think for themselves? Or was there something in the forging process that allowed him to basically enforce his will on the swords, which is what led to the curse? And so, like that's another thing I've been thinking about recently was like, do the swords names have any significance? Because the Wado Ichimonji, like the translation for the name is the Road of Harmony. So does that have anything to do with, like the sword's quote unquote spirit or soul? Does it somehow in any way define it? And maybe it doesn't, maybe it does. And I think at least my idea for part of what becoming the world's greatest swordsman is more than just understanding, you know, the sword techniques or having strength or having willpower. I think un, it also has to do with understanding what you use your sword for and what it means to be a swordsman. And again, that comes back to the idea and repeating of like that's something Zoro needs to learn. And I really feel like he's only going to do that by repairing his relationship with Tashigi. Because when Kuina died, like in the stupid way of falling down the stairs, like Zoro got really mad at her and he's like, oh, you made a promise to me and I can't believe you broke it. And I have to wonder if that somehow plays a role in his antagonistic relationship with Tashigi. Like he holds it against Kuina for dying all those years ago and not living up to her end of the bargain. And so I'd like to see him get emotional on Wano and kind of break down and address why the hell he's being such an asshole to Tashigi. Because honestly, she doesn't deserve it. And it's kind of like, I feel like he needs to get closure on his feelings for her if he's going to move on. And then, of course, we have to take a step back and talk about Tashigi. Tashigi, what do I want for her character arc on Wano? I want her to be powerful because like, with the entire thing we've been stressing this entire arc is the idea that women are not as powerful as men. Yes, they are not as physically powerful as men. And so what I really would like to see Oda do this arc is enforce the idea that there is more than one kind of strength. Like, yes, Zoro may have greater physical strength than Tashiki, but maybe she has a stronger affinity towards the breath of all things or towards something else. And I really want her to get the confidence boost to believe that she's just as capable as Zoro is. And really, plays into another theory I have where I believe that the way she's going to do that is to get training from someone who's mastered the breath of all things. Crazy theory time. My theory is that Green Bull is the descendant of Kitetsu, and that he is going to come to Wano, and he's going to teach Zoro and Tashigi how to master the breath, and that he's also a descendant of Kitetsu, and he's going to make Zoro a new sword. Bunch of crazy ideas. How did I even end up here? This is all kind of massive speculation, but I know when Green Bull was initially introduced, everyone was thinking, oh, his fasting is somehow a way for him to, like, because he has a plant zone and he's photosynthesizing food and that's why he doesn't need energy. I agree to an extent. Like, I've theorized about what Green Bull's devil fruit could be before, and I've come down to either he's going to be an Entzoan of some kind, or he's going to have a tree or plant logia, or he's going to be a golem or something. And then I was doing research related to some other theories of mine, and I came across the idea of aesthetics. So basically, to reach spiritual enlightenment, much like Buddha did when he was meditating, you basically starve yourself to heighten all your senses. And going back to Zoro's fight with Mr. One, the time he was able to pull out the breath of all things was when he was literally on the brink of death. Like he was about to die. And I assume that his senses were heightened to the max, and that was when he was able to sense the breath of all things. So, what if Green Bull is doing something similar in his trying to perfect his ability to use the breath by basically starving himself to heighten all his senses? Because I kind of find it odd. Like, you're like, oh, well, how's Green Bull going to change? Why is Green Bull going to be on Wano? He's already at Reverie. Why would he go there? Like, is Reverie over right now? I think so. I'm kind of disappointed that it is. And so does that mean, Green Bull's just going to stay there? Maybe. But it seems kind of odd that Fujitora, one of the new admirals, was introduced in an arc where he played a vital role. And then you have Green Bull introduced in another vital arc, which is really kind of abruptly cut off. So did Oda introduce him just to tease him now and we have to wait, 2, 3 years until Wano's over and then he'll come back? Maybe that's still possible. But could he also show up on Wano? Again, that's another idea. And why would he show up on Wano is probably the question everyone's wondering. And this really has to tie into like this is just going to be me now going into all my crazy speculation, but here we go. So we know Smoker Tashigi after Punk Hazard went to meet with Dr. Vegapunk. So when we know that they're about 2, 3 days away from there, and then we never really saw the outcome of the meeting, and we never saw really what Vegapunk was up to. We also know from Oda that we are going to eventually learn what devil fruits are from Vegapunk himself. So are we going to learn it, by proxy? Is Vegapunk going to be explaining that to someone in the Marines, or will the Straw Hats learn it from him directly? Up for debate. That's one part of the theory. The other part has to do with the character we were recently introduced to, which was the warlord Edward Weevil. So I know everyone expected Marco to be coming to Wano with the Straw Hat crew. And as we found out recently, he's not going to come there, but he has passed a message on through Cat Viper to be passed on to Luffy, and he knows that Weevil is coming after him. Now, is Weevil actually Whitebeard's son? Doubt it. I kind of feel like that would go against the entire message of who Whitebeard was and what he stood for. But really, anything is possible. And now that we know that him and Bucking apparently had a connection in the past, it seems more likely. But I'm still kind of going to discount it just because I don't like the idea. But, Oda's going to Oda, so who knows? But I know, like us, when he was initially introduced, a lot of fans pointed out that he did have scars around his neck and his arms and almost made him look like a zombie. Could he be a zombie? Perhaps. The only person we know that could make him a zombie is Moria, and people are speculating, where is he? And is he even going to come back on Wano? I'm going to say yes, because he has beef with Kaido that he needs to settle. And this is another theory of mine, but I think that because when you look at the flashbacks to Roger's execution all those years ago, you'll notice that Moria didn't have those stitches on his neck that he did. And we know from Thriller Bark that he was apparently at one point strong enough that he went toe to toe with Kaido. And apparently, whatever something happened to him, and now he's gotten significantly weaker. So, my idea is what if when Kaido and him fought, he got tortured? Kaido, when he was fighting him, basically vivisected him from here to groin, and Moria's basically had to stitch himself back together after the fight. And if he comes back again on Wano to settle the beef, I feel like he's going to have built himself a new body to get himself back into his prime mode. And so I really expect Wano to be, or Moria to be on Wano. And if Edward Weevil has some kind of connection to him, I could see him showing up on Wano because of that. Again, doesn't have to happen. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. So how else would he get there if he's not going to? And that kind of really goes into another point I have is, why would Oda at this point, when we're fighting emperors, bring in another warlord into the system when we know that after Reverie, the warlord system is going to be abolished? So we know that Reverie lasts for apparently 8 days. And I don't know how long, how much time has passed from when Luffy and them went from Whole Cake Island to Wano, and how the timeline's going to match up, but that puts a time limit of at least 8 days on the events of Wano. And so that means at the end of Reverie, I expect the warlord system to be abolished. So I don't see why you'd make Weevil a warlord if he's going to come back in a later arc having lost his title. And then this kind of plays into something else. We know from what Kizaru said that he's basically created massive, massive destruction on his quest to, hunt down, track down all the members of the Whitebeard crew. And that he really gets away with it because he's a warlord and he's immensely powerful. If Fujitora wanted, he could probably use that against him in Reverie to be like, oh, look at this warlord. He's going around causing so much damage. And, look at Crocodile, look at Doflamingo. All these guys abuse their privileges for being warlords for their own ends. We need to abolish the system. That would work, but would that be reason enough to make Weevil a warlord? I don't think so. And so, really comes down to what is his purpose then in the series? Why introduce someone pretending to be Whitebeard's son? And then I thought about, the message that Cat Viper sent with Marco send to Luffy. So if Weevil goes to find Marco, is one of two things that can happen. Weevil loses, everything's fine, whatever. I don't think that's going to happen. Or he defeats Marco, and then, he finds out from him that there's no treasure, but he doesn't buy it. And then he shows up in a later arc after the Straw Hats leave. The third option I'm going to present is that either someone on the island maybe tells Weevil that, Marco sent a love message through Cat Viper to Wano for Luffy. And maybe Buckin's like, oh, well, that message must have been telling him that, this is where the treasure is buried. And they go down there to hunt him. Or, again, the Moria connection, they could be like, oh, we'll just go regroup with Moria on Wano. And they go there and meet him there. But I feel like he has to be coming to Wano to make his warlord status relevant for a couple of reasons. At the end of Reverie, there's going to be a major news break, shit's going to go down. And I expect that if the news of either another warlord meeting his hands at the hands of Luffy gets out, or, Weevil ends up becoming an ally to Luffy at the end of Wano, either way is going to completely affect the warlord system. And I feel like that has a greater impact on not only Fujitora's push to get rid of it, but also to some other Reverie ideas I have I'll kind of toss out later. But I do really expect, Weevil to be heading to Wano one way or another. And if Weevil's heading to Wano, there's a couple other characters I expect to be tailing him there as well. And you guys are going to think I'm really crazy for this, but I'm expecting Sir Crocodile and Jewelry Bonnie to accompany, or not accompany, but to also head to Wano. Why? Because they both have a connection to Whitebeard, and I cannot believe for a second that they're just going to stand by while news of a warlord who's self-proclaimed Whitebeard's son is not going to, pull them into action. Because anyone that knows who Whitebeard really was would know that that's bullshit. That's complete and utter garbage. And I think they would both be willing to go and hunt him down to find out what that reasoning is. For Jewelry Bonnie, it's a little bit more cut and dry because during the Marineford, we saw her crying when Squard stabbed Whitebeard. And then immediately after Blackbeard killed Whitebeard during Marineford. She said, it's all his fault. She went to the New World and was immediately captured by Blackbeard and his crew. And I don't think this was a case of, oh no, she was going hunting for someone else and she just happened to coincidentally run into Blackbeard and get captured. No, I think she went specifically hunting for him, which means she had some kind of connection to Whitebeard. Was it this that she admired him? Maybe. Um, I suppose the other speculation was like, was she his lover or something? I guess it depends on what you think her age is. I know a lot of people are expecting that she's probably older than she looks. I don't think so. And I know the recent Kuma reveal in Reverie's probably pushed it towards the end of, oh no, she's actually Kuma's mother, which again, I'm not so sure about, but anything's possible. And I know you're all thinking, oh, well, she's at Reverie right now, so your ideas are batshit crazy. Why the hell would she even come to Wano? Well, we can get into that a little bit later. But Sir Crocodile, why would he? What's his connection to Whitebeard? I suppose is the greater question, and I think that really ties into what his past is. Popular theory in the fandom right now is that Croc is a trans man. So like he used to be a woman, and he went to Ivankov at some point in the past and asked to be changed into a man, and that's the big secret he's hiding. I'd love to see that. I really would. But Oda's track record with, LGBTQ characters in the series has not been particularly good. I don't even say like, I don't even say pretty good. Like, I'm going to say it's atrocious. Even as much as I love Ivankov and I love Bond, like, they are really caricatures of people. And I like that they're both characters who are not defined by being queer. They are still very comical. And so, is Oda really going to break that trend with Crocodile and tell a really compelling story about an actual trans person? I'd love to believe that. I really, 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 really would love to believe that this is going to be the first of many positive changes we'd see from Oda. But like I say, like Whole Cake Island is just completely ruined a lot of the expectations and trust I had in him as an author. So I'm not really sure that he's going to be able to do this justice. Now, years and years ago, I wrote an editorial where I basically theorized that there's going to be 4 new additions to the Straw Hat crew. 2 of them would be, one of them's obvious, like Jinbei's going to join. That's pretty obvious. I don't even know why I need to restate that. But the other 3 were, I think, Sir Crocodile, Jewelry Bonnie, and Momonosuke were going to be the final 3 Straw Hats. I'll post links later if you'd like to read my ideas and things on it, because it'll be a little bit too extensive to get into here. But basic reasoning for when I was writing that editorial back then, I had slightly different ideas for Croc. That really kind of feeds into the struggle that Tashigi has, where it's like, can you be a woman in the One Piece world in any profession and be taken seriously? And I wonder if that's what Croc's thing was that, he was a woman, he was a woman that wasn't taken seriously. And then, he wanted power. Like, Croc respects power. Like, we've seen this with Whitebeard in that he respects power. Like, that's the reason he went searching for the Pluton, was he went to the New World, got baptized, couldn't stand, wasn't up to snuff, and he got booted back to paradise. And he spent the next how many ever years just building up the resources and connections to be able to gain military might. And then, of course, he lost it. And then again in Marineford, when he comes back to Whitebeard, he is really, really mad when he finds out that, Whitebeard got stabbed by Scorp, because, like, oh, you're the man I respected, because to me, you were the epitome of what it means to be powerful, to hold power. Like, you're the epitome of strength, manliness, and all of that. goes with this title of being the world's strongest man. And I think Crocodile is a little bit let down that, Whitebeard wasn't meeting his expectations. And, the other question I'm supposed to ask is why is Croc so embarrassed about, whatever it is that Ivankov has hold over him, if it is being a woman? If he was a trans man, like, would he would that be something he's embarrassed about, being like, "Oh, I was a woman before, but I'm a man now." I don't know if that's necessarily something he'd be embarrassed about, or even if that would be a reason for Ivankov to even threaten him with something like that. Because I think Ivankov, of all people, would have been understanding if that's what the case was. But what if, but like the phrase that came back to me when I was thinking about it was when Ivankov basically said to the, Luffy and Bond, where he said, miracles don't happen to people that don't help themselves. And so I wonder if that's why he's really mad at Croc is looking for the cheats on how to become strong rather than trying to identify what strength is and what it means. Which is why I wonder if that's why he's holding it over him, because he's like, oh, you didn't accept who you were, you didn't accept what you are, and you're just looking for cheap ways to kind of build up this strength. And is that possibly what it is? Yes, no, maybe. I mean, Croc's really a mystery at this point, and like anything is possible with him. And I'd, like, could he come back at any point in a later arc? Probably he could. But like Oda's teased, like the other thing with Croc is Oda teased him all the way back in Alabasta. And then he could have written him off as like a one-time villain, or just like shunted him off to the background. Then in the cover stories, we found out that his dream was once to be Pirate King. Super interesting. You'd never think of Croc being a person that wanted to be, you know, anything like that, or whatever the reason was he wanted to be Pirate King. Then again, in Impelled Down, Oda builds up the mystery with, oh, he has some connections to Ivankov, whatever his secret is, he doesn't want it to get out. Then again, in Marineford, you build it up with, oh, he respects Whitebeard, he has some kind of connection with him. I'm guessing he lost his arm to Whitebeard, also his got the scar on his face from him. And all right, after that, he also saved Luffy and Jinbei from Marines. Again, an interesting kind of character thing to do for Croc, because yes, I know the reason he gave was, oh, I don't want the Marines to win, but you'd think he would hate Luffy for, being the one that basically destroyed his dreams of ever finding the Pluton and of taking over Alabasta. So why would he want to help him? Like, yeah, you could argue that he hated the Marines more than he hated him, but like again, maybe not. Like we don't really know enough about Croc, so again, that's just another mystery to add to the pile. And then we realize, and then after that, we find out that he's going back to the New World with Dust. Okay, fine. And then after the time skip, this was the really curious bit. Chapter 700, we see him shadowed along with Jewelry Bonnie and Jinbei seen reading the newspaper about the Law Luffy Alliance. Then again, after Whole Cake Island, he again goes to Crocodile and shows him reading the paper. If he wasn't going to be relevant in an arc coming up very soon, why would he keep going back to Crocodile and showing, this guy is doing something, he's up to something, you need to be watching out for him. And what's curious is in both of the post time skip panels where we see Croc, Dust is nowhere to be seen. Now, this could just be a case of Oda wanting to, play coy and not have him in there to be like, oh, is it really Crocodile that you're seeing? It could also be a case of, oh, Dust is off doing something else and he'll come back into the story later. My personal theory, if there's any chance of Croc joining the crew, it'll only happen after Dust Bones dies. And this ties into something else we saw in the cover story for Baroque Works. Dust Bones wanted to be a hero at some point in the past. We don't know what set him on the path to becoming an assassin, But at some point, he wanted to be a hero, gave up on that dream, became a killer instead. So does that mean he's completely given up on becoming, a hero again? Maybe. But honestly, I could see Dust doing something, sacrificing himself either to save Crocodile or save someone, and dying a hero, and that being the impetus for Crocodile joining the Straw Hats. Because again, if we go back to Alabasta, like going into digging into Croc's past, Croc seems to have an issue with trust. It's evident in the way that he planned out his takeover of Alabasta, in that he deliberately set up a plan where the trust in the king was undermined, and then, until the level where people stopped believing in him, and then Croc would swoop in and take over. And it's also evidence in how the people of Alabasta really treated him, where, he's Crocodile the hero, and they placed all this faith and trust in him. And he shows how, bullshitty that was because he's the one undermining the kingdom. But it also is kind of telling that he kind of looked down on the people for believing in it so easily. And the scene, the panel in Alabasta that always has stood out to me is the one where he was talking about Vivi, and he tells Luffy, she has a great deal of trust in you, Straw Hat, but trust is the most overrated thing in the world. And I asked Stephen Paul, the translator for the release, if there was any special emphasis on the text there. And there was it wasn't like a special, like Oda wasn't saying like, boom, look at this, but I think he did want to draw your attention to the fact that, Croc, why doesn't Croc trust people? It's evident in all his actions to with even Robin. Like Robin and him worked together for 16 years. And even at the end, he tells her, you know what? I knew you were going to betray me because I never trusted anyone. It's kind of interesting when you see him in Impel Down and afterwards, he seems to place a lot of trust in Dustbones because Crocodile, unlike Doflamingo's whole shtick was, I can always forgive failure, but I'll never forgive a betrayal of my trust. And Croc's whole shtick has always been, I'll forgive, I won't forgive failure, but I will forgive, betrayal of trust because I always expect it. So why didn't he, really look down on Dust for having lost his fight to Zoro? You know, and why does he place so much trust on him? Like he specifically went out of his way in Impel Down to break him out of prison and take him to the new world with him. And I feel like if Croc's going to get any kind of character development going forward, it's going to be learning to trust again. And the only way I can see that happening is if the person, like the one true friend he has, gets killed in front of him. And this is kind of the part where the theory kind of diverges, but this could either be happening because Edward Weevil kills Dustbones or one of Kaido's calamities. Either at this point, I'm really flexible on either one being the case, but that's kind of my take on why I expect Crocodile to be on Wano. Is he's either going there to avenge the death of Dustbones, or he's hunting down, but he's doing it by hunting down the man who killed him, or he's just chasing after the self-proclaimed son of Whitebeard. Now let's go back to Jewelry, Bonnie, and Greenbull, both of whom we've seen at Reverie. And then why do I expect them to be coming to Wano? So Jewelry Bonnie has some kind of connection to Kuma and Whitebeard. So if Weevil's going to be involved in an arc with Luffy and them, and he's not coming back, I can't see Bonnie not also being involved in the arc. So how does she get from Reverie to Wano, especially when she's there to save Kuma? But Sabo and the Revolutionaries are also there to save Kuma as well. So would it be possible for them to potentially meet up and then and then they cut a deal? Because I think Fujitaro was supposed to bring in Luffy and Law's heads, and he failed to do so. So would Akainu be willing to send Green Bull in to finish what Fujitora started? Maybe. You could send him after him to Wano and be like, hey, I want you to bring back Luffy's head. And that seems kind of like, could happen, may not happen. But there's potentially a stronger reason for or an incentive for him to send someone to Wano. And that really ties into what we saw. So in the Caribou cover story, we saw him leading a revolution on an island connected to Kaido, where there's a weapons factory. We know that he's trading weapons with Doflamingo for Smile Devil Fruits, right? And we know that when Koala reported to Dragon after the Dressrosa arc, she pointed out that the metal used in making those weapons was a very specific metal called liquor iron ore or drunken iron ore. I'm not sure which the official translation was for that. And I don't think Oda just dropped that hint in like just wishy-washy. And we know that Blackbeard went, stole the weapons from the revolutionaries and before the government got there. But what if CP0 managed to find like a few remnants of said weapons left behind there and they managed to identify, the metal from those weapons? If it's really a rare metal that can be found in only a few specific places, like say Wano, then potentially that would be incentive enough for the Marines to send forces in to occupy the country and be like, we have to check out to see what's happening with Wano. Where do these weapons, as a weapons factory coming in? Would they send in a full force initially? I don't think so, because it'd be, as they noted, the samurai are powerful. I don't think Akainu would either get the authority or just be willing to commit that many forces right away. But if you want to send in a covert, smaller force, right, you could send in, say, an admiral who's potentially from Wano to go in, infiltrate the island, find out what's happening there, and then report back. And this kind of feeds into the idea of, how would the Marines get information from what happened in Wano if the arc is about to span the same time as Reverie? Because we know Wano's a closed off country. So they have no real outside access via news, whatever, for news to get out. So unless someone sneaks in, the Marines and the world government aren't going to find out anything. So that's part of my reasons the Green Book could be sent there, is to investigate the weapon smuggling. The other reason is kind of going into the crazy territory again, but Dr. Vegapunk. Now, this has been a theory of mine I've held for a good long while, but I believe that Vegapunk is part of the revolutionaries. Because it kind of always wondered, why would Kuma be so willing to commit himself to this top secret project that would really only benefit the Marines and the world government, cause them to do more harm unless they had a trusted source on the inside. And again, like when Kuma was underwent that final transformation, Vegapunk was willing to let him program in his own mission to protect the Straw Hat ship. And I don't think I could see someone that's loyal to the world government doing something like that. And so I did a little digging and I came up with the crazy theory about whom Oda could have drawn his inspiration for Vegapunk from. And I think that Vegapunk and Kaido are based on the tale of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Because, as you know, I think you all remember, whenever someone refers to Kaido, they all, like when Big Mom referred to him during Whole Cake Island, she called him a creature. That's a very specific word, like specifically called him a creature. And then during his initial introduction, we find out that, he's been captured by the Marines countless times. He's been tortured. He can't die, etc., etc. And then and then the biggest speculation right now is that Kaido has a dragon devil fruit. Dr. Vegapunk created an artificial smile dragon devil fruit that Momonosuke ate. How did he create, the artificial devil fruit, And how did he create dragons? Because we saw the artificial dragons on Punk Hazard. We know the dragons used to exist in this world at some point. Were they native to the world or were they created? Different question for a different time. But he somehow managed to probably get his hands on their DNA and create, artificial dragons and even create an artificial dragon devil fruit. So if Kaido does have a dragon devil fruit, is it possible that by experimenting on him, Vegapunk was able to create the artificial devil fruit based on the research he did there? And then so I started digging a little deeper into like the mythos of Frankenstein. And the interesting thing that came up is there's a couple of interesting facts about it. The biggest one being that everyone thinks that the thing he did was, create a monster. Like that was his big like technological achievement. But what Frankenstein actually did was come up with a way to give inanimate objects life. Kind of like how Vegapunk was able to feed devil fruits to inanimate objects. So that's okay. That's like, okay, one thing doesn't mean that they're related at all. But then you look at more at Vegapunk's past, like when he was on the Winter Island. Look at all the research he was doing. So he's interested in warships, human cells, and astronomy. If you look at the original story of Frankenstein, he was interested in pretty much the exact same things. And the ultimate, and like Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein in the tale, his ultimate obsession was with the creation of life. And when he created the monster, he had to create something that was typically like proportion larger than a regular human because of the intricacies of creating like nerve endings, veins, and all that. And I know everyone's like fans like to speculate that Kaido is some kind of like monster made of like, or he's like something that a dragon that ate the Oni fruit or something like that. And fans have even speculated, why doesn't he just kill himself if that's his mission? And my theory idea is, what if Kaido is basically a chimera of a bunch of different species meant to be created to have been like, it was basically Vegapunk's experiment into trying to create a super soldier that went wrong. Because this kind of ties back into something we saw in Impel Down was Crocodile points out that the jailer beasts in Impel Down were all awakened zones. Question about that is, how did he even know they were awakened zones? And two, who created them? And, like, and then he said, like, the thing with awakened zones, like, they were, they seemed to be, like, the jailer beast and Impel Down seemed to be stuck in their awakened form, and they didn't seem to be able to escape. And then on Punk Hazard, we heard from Caesar that, Vegapunk used to do experiments on prisoners. So my question is, if Vegapunk is obsessed with creating devil fruits, did he find a way to create, like, basically force an awakening in a devil fruit user? And then are the awakened zone users, like, are they just results of his experiments? And did he do the same thing to Kaido? It's part of it is part of it is and is that the question is that part of what makes Kaido so durable is because he's an awakened beast that Vegapunk experimented on? Is that part of why he can't die? Because we know from like the Impel Down arc again that the awakened jailer beasts have incredible endurance, incredible stamina. Like Luffy hit them down several times and they kept getting back up easily. So could that be part of it? Was did Vegapunk basically experiment on Kaido and force an awakening on him and lead him to his immortality? And then, if that is the case, if he did truly create him, has he found a way to grant him the death that he wants? Like, has he found a way to finally be able to kill him? If so, does that mean he would show up on Wano to help end it? Again, probably. Especially since we know that Smoker Tashigi went to see him, and if we are completely 100% expect Smoker Tashigi to be on Wano. So could Vegapunk, either sneak on board with them or go with them to there? Possibly, because this also brings up the idea of, well, if the Straw Hats are going to learn how Devil Fruits work, are they going to learn it directly from Vegapunk? And if that's the way it's going to happen, it could either happen at the end of series or it could happen in Wano itself. And I'm kind of leaning towards the latter really being the thing that happens because I expect a couple of different endings for what happens after Reverie. Like after Wano Reverie, I keep saying they're big arcs, not only for my interest in the fandom, but for potentially what it means for the series going forward. And so a couple of crazy theories about Reverie. My two biggest ones are like the first one was something that Greg actually suggested years ago, but the idea being that Blackbeard will show up on Wano at the end, and then he will kill Kaido, take his devil fruit, and then storm Reverie. I 100% agree with that. I totally see that happening. And the other theory I've had for a long time is that Akainu is going to use that opportunity to basically enforce a military totalitarian regime. He's basically going to take power from all the kingdoms after Reverie, and he's going to go on a purge in the New World. Because we've heard from Bahamut and Dressrosa before that he's done a world conscription military draft and he's building up an army. And I cannot see that being put to use in any other way except for him to basically go around destroying all pirates because he is a zealot. Like he is not going to sit still until all the pirates all over the world are dead. So again, will that happen? Maybe, maybe not. How is that affected by Im-sama being the supposedly new like evil head of the world government? I'm not a big fan of having the idea of this big bad one government leader pulling all the strings and me like, oh, I am the true force behind the throne, because I always felt like having Akainu, the world government, and the Gorosei be the antagonist was enough. Like we didn't need like an even bigger super big bad to be like, oh, this is going to be end series villain, especially if it's a man. I'm really not interested because this series has been so chock full of male villains that adding another evil one to the mix really isn't going to make much of a difference to me. And I don't like the idea that that there's one person basically manipulating, pulling the strings of the world, because I like the idea better that that the antagonist Luffy's really fighting towards the end is a system of oppression and control, which goes directly against his values of, fighting for freedom. And really not just freedom for himself, but freedom for like all the inhabitants of the world. And like, and then now having this idea that, one of this big bad will be in charge of all of it, I'm not really crazy sold on that. Unless it's a woman, in which case, color me 1,000% more interested. If Im-sama is a woman, oh, I would love that so much. Like that is my ideal dream, and I have a couple of theories, speculations on her intentions and things, but I'll save that for a later date. But if things are really going to go to shit after Wano Reverie, allegiances are going to have to be like set in stone. Like we're going to have an idea of exactly who's going to be on whose side. And I know at the end of Reverie, like Stelly's going to have his own little faction of kings and queens that are basically going to support Akainu. And I fully expect that Vivi and the other Straw Hat allies will likely meet up with the revolutionaries, and they'll set up a meetup with Dragon to start planning what to do. And that brings in the question of what's Vegapunk going to do? Because if Akainu is planning on storming the New World. He's going to want weapons. And he's going to make Horse Vegapunk to make those weapons for him, unless Vegapunk makes a move and steals out from under the world government's thumb. Could he be at Reverie and do that? Sure. Sabo and the others could sneak, if he's part of the revolutionaries, Sabo and the others could jump in, kidnap him, take him out with them when he goes. That's also possible. I'd be totally cool with that. And honestly, that's another idea I have, is that Caesar is eventually going to join the world government back up again, and he's going to take over Vegapunk's role. And I truly believe he's going to achieve what Vegapunk could not and perfect the cure for gigantism. Because I know this has been a theory the fans have been throwing out that, oh, what if Imsalma is Uranus, and what if her power is that she can control Zunesha? Again, not an idea I'm in love with because it seems too similar to Poseidon. And I really like that idea that Oda's making each of these ancient weapons distinct from each other, and to have like the idea that there's two people that can control gigantic destructive monsters isn't really creative to me. And we've also got the fact that the world government is obsessed with gigantification. Vegapunk's been researching, and Caesar's been researching, and we know the government's been doing it for centuries. And in Greek mythos, Uranus was the one that gave birth to the Titans. And so I can't see it not being related to that. And that really relates to my idea for what that giant straw hat sitting in the freezer is. I think that's big red herring. I do not think the straw hat is the actual treasure. I think the actual treasure is a Joy Boy, and that he's actually the original Uranus. And I think in his blood is the secret to unlocking gigantism. So why hasn't the world government been able to perfect it? Maybe Vegapunk's been faking this entire time, maybe multitude of other reasons. Is it possible that I'm just talking out of my ass here completely? But I can't see this, like seeing the straw hat kind of reinforce this idea for me, because I know everyone's saying like, oh, it's either like the D symbol is actually a hat, or there's some reason they're keeping this around and that they can't destroy it or whatever, or the crazy theories that the hat's an alien parasite or some kind of shapeshifter or something. I can understand the idea of, that the hat is basically like a tribute to Joy Boy back when he was the king of the ancient kingdom, like, the D clan wore it as a symbol of their link to him. I can buy that. I can't buy why you keep a giant hat sitting around in storage. And then it feeds into a couple other ideas, but I'll probably save that for an Ancient Kingdom video I'm going to do later. But either way, like Reverie is going to be big. Like it's going to set the precedent for what's going to happen in the series going forward, and a lot of allegiances are going to be changed and made. So right now, like, I'm in a weird place right now because I have super high expectations for what I'd like to see and what I want, for Wano Reverie. Am I going to be mad if none of my theories come true? Not really. Like, I mean, it's not, I won't be mad if my theories don't come true. I will be mad if the spirit of them isn't really addressed. So if Zoro gets a basic character arc like Sanji did during Whole Cake Island, yeah, I will be super mad. I will hate it really, really. I will hate it. Tashigi doesn't come to Wano, again, I will really, really hate it. If she comes to Wano but she gets nerfed or is just used as plot device for Zoro's character development, again, I would mostly hate that. Apart from that, I don't really have much in the way of expectations. Like, I'd really just want to see Oda going back to his prime level of storytelling. And this might be another video like I do sometime in the future, but looking back at, I want the pre-time skip Oda back, and I want him to make me fall in love with the series again. And really, like, I really want him to see him grow and progress as an author, because right now it feels like he's gotten really, really stagnant and complacent. And I'm sorry, fans, like I love most of you, but a lot of you kind of reinforce this idea of that, what he's been doing is good enough. And I don't buy that. Like, we're in the new world now, and he really needs to step up his game. And like Wano Reverie, like this is his baby. Like this is the arc he's been saying he's excited to talk about forever and ever and ever. And I would really like to see that actually play out. Like I'd like Wano Reverie could potentially be a top one arc. Like it could be one of the greatest arcs in One Piece. If Oda tells me a good story, that's really all I'm asking for. Like, I just want to be told a good story. And that's really all my expectations for the series are. And I really hope he delivers on that front. I've suggested what my ideas for it are, and that's all I can expect. Like, I will just say, like, I really do expect sexism to be one of the things that's addressed in the series going forward. But that'll probably be a discussion I save for another stream I'm going to be doing with a couple of friends, because I want to have some more female fan input on that before I start, getting into it myself. And I want to kind of talk about that also. I'm going to do a Whole Cake Island stream. I think that's better saved for that art for that stream, because Whole Cake Island gets a lot of praise for being very women forward and women centric and like, rah rah powerful for women. And I see it as a spectacular failure in that respect. So I kind of want to dig into that. So, planning on right now doing it on Monday. So hopefully, I'll do something similar like this and then just do a Whole Cake Island reread and then just stream my thoughts about it. I'm not sure if I'm going to be doing it all in one sitting or splitting it up into one or more. But probably see you because I have a lot of thoughts on that arc I need to get out. So I'll try to do some research this weekend, set up, and maybe put some thoughts out on there. But I think that's about it. I could probably go on about Wano Reverie some more, but I kind of want to save some for later. And I don't think I've been rambling on for long enough today. So thank you all for stopping by. I hope you enjoyed the stream. If you have any comments or things you want to leave in the video below, any criticisms, any advice, anything like that would be really great. And we'll look forward to making more of these.